Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to another edition of Hell Island. Thought I'd do a little bit of classical British music to play us in today. As, you know, we continue the paradoxical, incredibly weird concept for a podcast of just this American kid talking about British politics across the pond, which, I always do find interesting, but I get if British people, are always, I definitely would say I come in with a little bit of that, kind of obviously insecurity coming about in talking about the topic, even though I find it so interesting and so fascinating. And that is, in part why I do want to have someone from across the pond come soon, and we'll be doing this show in the spring in London, which is going to be really, really cool. But for now, we just got to talk about, really just a whole host of very, very interesting and important things today. But we start with Suella Braverman, and a really interesting piece in Novara Media talking about this very, very interesting, both rise in Europe in the far right, and we see that in Suella Braverman, and who, of course, is the former Home Secretary, now backbencher in the Conservative Party, and, of course, Nigel Farage, and I think he's in the Reform Party now, or whatever he's calling it, just Brexit Party, Reform Party. He's always, just a force in British politics. And we talked about this in our most recent show. Suella Braverman really resigning after the disgraceful Remembrance Sunday situation where she essentially invited a bunch of football hooligans and racists to just come down and have a massive fight and have a massive, just some sort of altercation in front with the Metropolitan Police in front of the Cenotaph, all while the Palestinian protests were going on completely undisturbing, miles and miles away in London. But yeah, this was obviously a big part of it. I think Tommy Robinson, Stephen the Axley Lennon of the EDL were both same guy, former leader of the EDL, was in attendance. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, what a weird name. But anyway, they stormed the barricades and clashed with the police guarding the Cenotaph, leaving 9 officers injured and 82 counter-protesters arrested. Braverman had been widely seen to be stoking tensions in advance of what she branded, along with other pro-Palestinian demonstrations taking place across the UK, a hate march. So in addition to demonizing those peaceful protests, many saw Braverman as encouraging the far right specifically. And that's a great, intro from this piece there in Novara by Aaron Winter, talking about this really disturbing rise in the far right, and this kind of almost flex of the muscle that we saw over Remembrance Sunday, and just the role that Braverman has with that. Since his most recent electoral heyday in the late 2000s and early 2010s, when the BNP was an electoral force, Nick Griffin appeared on BBC Question Time, the traditional far right gradually went into decline, although some have clearly returned emboldened. There are a number of reasons for this. One is the persistent legal troubles faced by its leaders, such as Tommy Robinson, who has been in recent years charged with assault, libel, and contempt of court. Another is that the far-right policies have been co-opted and mainstreamed by the Conservative government, often under the auspices of fending off the competition they, particularly UKIP, may pose, and securing white working-class votes. A third is a deliberate attempt by the same government to also downplay the threat of the far right in order to continue to focus on their shared targets, migrants and Muslims. And obviously the Prevent Counter-Terrorism Strategy review in 2021 that caused a big uproar. William Shawcross, the author of that, really was blown apart by a lot of people throughout kind of English civil society and just a lot of people from a lot of different political backgrounds saying, this completely falsely downplays the threat from far-right activists and overplays the threat from migrants coming into the country. That was, a really big step, and one of the things that Braverman kind of heralded at the time. And Braverman's comments about the Palestinian demo were only the latest in a series of dog whistles to the far right. One of the most notorious came after the attack in February last year on a hotel housing asylum seekers in Merseyside, which was a really kind of stark moment of some of these poisonous politics that we've seen over the recent years starting to come to the fore. While Braverman condemned the attack, she worded her condemnation in a manner which clearly blamed the victims. The alleged behavior of some asylum seekers is never an excuse for violence, Braverman said. So essentially saying, just because they're awful doesn't mean you should go kill them. Come on. Just essentially doing really the bare minimum there. Yeah, Braverman's dog whistle rhetoric, harmful as it was, paled in comparison to her policies. A month after the hotel incident, she introduced the illegal migration bill to stop migrants crossing the channel in small boats by arresting, detaining, and deporting them. Braverman's support for deportation is also a long-standing far-right trope, although historically it has been in support of repatriation. Braverman's most high-profile policy has been the deportation of failed asylum seekers to Rwanda, and this is currently getting fought out in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, taunting her critics and those who will potentially be included in the flights, as well as predicting a victory. Braverman referred to the possible start of the flights in 2023 as her dream, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen now, thank goodness. Braverman referred to the possible start of the flights as the dream, but this would not happen as both the ECHR and UK Supreme Court's enemies of the far right, along with international law and judicial bodies, deemed the policy unlawful, and Braverman and the government, who has also undermined the courts repeatedly, were about to lose their flagship policy. It was not, I suspect, only down to the far right at the cenotaph. It is rarely more than one thing or one person. When Braverman stepped down, it was as if her extremism had finally exposed and could be expunged from the government. It's trying to say essentially this was, some people thought, mistakenly so, that they could expulge this extremism from the government and that it would be gone forever. What happens to a representative of the far right without a place in the cabinet? With Braverman on the front bench, the Tories had someone to articulate their more extreme ideas and scapegoat if they backfired. Without her, it may be harder for Sunak to hide his agenda. Sunak is under a great deal of pressure in Starmer's Labour, which instead of offering opposition from the left is attempting to outgun the Tories on Israel and immigration. Immediately after sacking Braverman, Sunak brought in the former PM, David Cameron, as his foreign secretary, which is another kind of big shift to the center there. And essentially, he's making the good point, Winter is here. He's making the very prescient point, I think, that this is only going to, it's only going to expose Sunak to the Tory base for what he is, which is kind of a relatively, maybe more socially conservative than someone like Boris Johnson, but also definitely someone with the economic policies and kind of migration policies and, kind of neoliberal worldview of someone like Jeremy Hunt, or someone just completely at the center of the Tory party, and, the continual bringing in of somebody like David Cameron, and the just general direction of the government at this point is very, very, very telling. And without Suella Braverman in there trying to, kind of make things better, make them maybe a little bit more palatable to the Tory base, that, and the fact that she's now able to really cater to that base with backbenchers only, I would say, bodes well for her and people like Nigel Farage, who can, now attend Farage back at the Tory party conference recently for the first time in, I think, since like the 1980s. Definitely since he wasn't even a really major political figure at all, and definitely showing some signs of wanting to return to prominence. And all they really have to do is just wait until the party goes down, and they could, presume to lead the party out of opposition in the, period after the next general election. It's a very, very, very conceivable strategy, and is only helped by the fact that Suella Braverman is at a government, again, unable to, as Aaron Winter very aptly points out, take the blame for some of the failed right-wing ideas of the Sunak government, and is now able to kind of come in and hurl spitballs from the back benches, as they say. All right, with that being said, though, we are going to move to our next story in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. Okay, so we are moving on now to our next story, and it is another great piece here by Rivka Brown. So she's really talking about, and it is something that I don't know how many listeners of the show are from the UK versus from America, but it really is something that we do kind of have over the Brits, which is, really well articulated freedom of speech. And that obviously has come under attack in the form of these, kind of requirements that a lot of people have to sign in order to get jobs, to, not participate in BDS, to serve in some, public positions in the U.S. You have to sign a pledge saying you will not participate in BDS. But we do have this kind of very, clear freedom of protest, and you will not really see someone fired over such, relatively low rent tweets, especially if they're, not in any sort of high office position. But that is what's going on right now in the UK. On Friday, 19th November, Tzipi Hotevely, definitely a Turkish, immigrant there. Maybe I'm wrong, but just based on the on that name, I'm assuming. So she was home studying when she heard a knock at her door. It was two officers from the North Yorkshire Police looking a bit bashful, saying, "I feel a bit silly here, to be honest with you," one of them told her. I don't believe you're a terrorist. Don't believe you're a terrorist." The officers had spent hopefully people are cringing, are laughing more than really cringing at my British accent. But they've been sent to speak to Egan about a tweet that she had posted on X/Twitter 2 weeks earlier. The tweet, which included the widely used Palestinian liberation slogan "From the river to the sea," had prompted Egan's referral to the Prevent Counterterrorism strategy. The incident exemplifies the crackdown on Palestinian solidarity, spearheaded until recently by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who we just talked about, egged on by establishment media, that has gone into overdrive since October 7th. She posted a picture of a Palestinian march and a very, very popular Palestinian chant throughout the world: "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And then, probably one of the biggest marches yet. This was probably the biggest pro-Palestine rally in York so far, she said. And she posted a video of the marchers in Yorkshire. One of the officers explained that they're visiting Egan's home because there's an overlap between people who use the phrase to support Palestinians and people who support Hamas, and that she'd been referred to nip any terrorism sympathies in the bud. Sounds like Minority Report, Egan replied. Amnesty titled its 92-page report on the strategy, "This is the Thought Police," which is kind of on the nose. But introduced in 2011, the Prevent duty is nominally designed to identify and reroute individuals vulnerable to radical ideologies, including Islamic fundamentalism and white supremacism. But, we can guess who it mostly targets. In practice, of course, Muslims. They were 65% of referrals to the program in 2017 were for Islamic extremism, even though by the Metropolitan Police's own admission, the far right is the fastest growing terror threat to the UK. In November, Amnesty called for the strategy to be abolished, saying it was incompatible fundamentally with human rights and accusing it of trading in Islamophobic stereotypes associating Muslims with extremism or terrorism. Yoon reckons it's no coincidence she's from a Muslim country. Here is Rivka Brown talking about this in a pretty interesting way on TikTok. And here it is.
Sounds to me like a pretty straightforward call for Palestinian freedom from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. But that's not what Keir Starmer hears. The Labour leader recently suspended MP Andy MacDonald for using the deeply offensive phrase in his speech at a Palestine rally.
We will not rest until we have justice, until all people, Israelis and Palestinians, between the river and the sea, can live in peaceful liberty.
Why is it so offensive? Well, according to Home Secretary Suella Braverman, it's because it's secretly a call for the destruction of the State of Israel and a staple of anti-Semitic discourse.
Again, really another great example of how the Zionist movements in various countries so easily trade off, different narratives and different, propaganda points, and say, this is anti-Semitic, call this out, try and take away this term from the conversation because it's becoming too effective. And you see, really, literally, the same strategies begin to pop up, because again, it is, to say it's coordinated is really a matter of fact at this point, just because it's one lobby, trying to lobby major Western countries. And honestly, it would be stupid for them, and for them trying to accomplish their interests. It would be stupid for them to not in some way coordinate it, for them to really not in some way combine their efforts here. So it really does make a lot of sense that that's what they're doing. And just because it looks bad, to the average person, and people want to call it anti-Semitic, does not mean it should be taken away from the conversation. Just a humble thought. All right, I'm going to go now to our next story, and it is with the ever lovely Sky News Network, and I believe we have Kay Burley on this one talking to Tzipi Hotevely. And we have a very, classic interview clip for you of her on, and it, unlike normally, did not go as well as she might have expected coming in. So this is Tzipi Hotevely talking to Sky News in a clip that was pretty viral over the weekend on X/Twitter.
Gaza called the Muassi. The Muassi is the place where they all can have shelters. Together with international organizations, we created shelters for the Palestinian people. So you cannot say Israel is not, facilitating that. But together with humanitarian aid.
So according to...
so there we have, it's a really, I think we got a little bit of kind of cut off clip here. Just let's start that again. All right, so here's the full clip talking about it. This is Tzipi Hotevely.
There is a river. There is a place in Gaza called the Muassi. The Muassi is the place where they all can have shelters. Together with international organizations, we created shelters for the Palestinian people. So you cannot say Israel is not, facilitating that. Together with humanitarian aid.
This is where she's talking about. A desolate wasteland of sand dunes next to the Mediterranean Sea. There is no aid in Al-Mawasi. There are no aid agency tents. There are no food kitchens. There is no help here.
So essentially, really, all. Oh my goodness. There we go. Okay. Essentially, literally, it is really kind of incredible, and it's a really kind of a showing of the conflict between we often see, I think, between the studio anchors and the on-the-ground reporters, because they are seeing what's happening on the ground. They are seeing that, and then, having to almost put that in conversation with, so to speak, the craziness of the rhetoric that they just hear on every day on their channels from the Israeli ambassador network of just, spokespeople, whether it be for the IDF, whether it be this person part of the Israel mission to the UK. So like someone like, Tzipi Hotevely just coming out saying that with no sort of factual evidence, no sort of really expectation to provide, any sort of real, logical, factual backing up for what she's saying. And it's just like, she's allowed to get away with it, but I think we're seeing more and more, and again, I think it'll happen as long as the conflict goes on. There will be more voices as more reporters get on the ground, as more reporters spend more time there, see what's going on, realize the reality of the situation. That truth will start to get back, and we'll start to see, I think, more and more moments like this creeping through, even to some of the most ardent mainstream media supporters of Israel. Because the reporters on the ground are saying, hey, this is happening right in front of our eyes. There's only so long. You can suppress a lot of instances of this. You can suppress a vast majority of instances of just really dramatic suffering and not really talk about it, not really put any sort of coverage onto it. But especially when there's someone on our air directly contradicting what I'm saying as a reporter on the ground, that is not going to be able to stand, especially on a consistent basis. And, the more that, standard is being pushed to be broken, the more, some reporter up, in Gaza or around Gaza who has knowledge of the situation actually and is willing to tell the truth about it, the more likely I think that truth is to get through.
And when Hamas committed a war crime by taking those innocent people at the 7th of October as hostages. And when they're coming back, what we realized is the only thing that made Hamas get into this negotiation, joined with the Qataris and the Americans, was the fact that Israel was with its troops on the ground in Gaza. Only this invasion that Israel brought the Hamas to release our hostages. So it's actually the other way around. When we don't put military pressure on Hamas, we get nothing. When we put military pressure on Hamas, Hamas starts to feel the pressure. And
again, I'm really honestly with this clip. First off, on a kind of shallow level, bewildered about the Hamas. Like, that has to be some sort of like internal PR directive to be like, okay, we're gonna do it with a guttural KH sound to make it sound, more evil, more barbaric, more animalistic, and just that's the way we're going to come in and approach it. But we can also see in this as well a more broader factual inaccuracy, because it's like Hamas, whatever's the non-anti-Semitic way to say it, that's the way I want to say it. I don't know about you guys. But they were very open, saying, and try to, according to at least, their reporting, according to, people who actually cared to follow the issue, were pretty much in unison saying, Hamas is trying to initiate these hostage releases and starting these talks, saying, oh, we'll do some civilians. We really want, there's multiple offers that they made at, throughout the course of various Israeli kind of barbarities throughout the course of the war. And pretty much they were all turned down because, they were focusing about, kind of military eradicating Hamas. But then now they get some hostages and saying, oh, they can easily turn around and have the West slap it up. That, it was because military pressure. That's what works. And it's kind of, not really as it is abstract, but you don't have, again, there's not all these instances where the truth can break through, not all these instances where, reporters on the ground can contradict the, top-down narrative to support Israel that exists on many of the stations, but there is sometimes where that definitely can happen, and it plays a pretty big role. All right, so that is, another great example of just this ridiculous, by the way, the concept of the safe zone of, it's al-Mawasi, it's here, it's there, and then just showing this is what the Israeli safe zone, and you should really go watch it. It's at Rami Jorah on Twitter has posted the video. And it shows just a completely deserted crater in the ground. It's literally just a crater in the ground. And it's like, if that's not a perfect example of what Israel offers to Palestinian civilians, just nothing, and just the absence of anything, just not even just normal land, just a hole in the ground. This is what you get. Just double middle finger all the way to the Sinai Peninsula. And I do not think there cannot be just cannot be a better analogous situation and just a picture of those sentiments. All right, we'll be back in a week. It's been Hell Island.